Everyone, it's Danny Lennon here from Elite Fitness and Performance Academy, and we're here with the fourth video of your 5-part series dealing with fat loss resistant clients. So we'll jump in straight in today into something that's going to be really important, and it's considering gut dysfunction. When we have a client, so we've gone through all the things we've looked at in the previous videos, and again a lot of that was quite straightforward. But again, if we're seeing someone that's eating correctly, training well, but fat loss not coming off, one of the major problems in the current this current time is gut dysfunction. There's so many people out there with problems with their gut. So there's three kind of main areas that I've outlined that I think most of those problems can be traced back to, and a lot of the time these kind of three main things actually may end up being the same thing, or they may interplay with one another, or they may lead on to each other. So we're going to look at each of those and just really outline them so that you can be aware of them and realize that this may be the issue behind your client. So the first one is going to be malabsorption. If they're not absorbing the nutrients from their food correctly, this is going to have knock-on effects, as we'll see later in the video. The second one is leaky gut. So this is kind of our slang term for increased intestinal permeability. So basically those gaps between the cells of the gut lining, when we get an increase in those, we have all sorts of problems that lead on, as we'll see. And then the final one is gut dysbiosis. And basically what I mean by dysbiosis is the balance of our so-called good bacteria and our bad bacteria in the gut. So let's jump in and look at malabsorption first. There's two key areas where this is probably going to be an issue, and we can kind of trace it back to these two main things. And the best thing is that there's probably some fail-safe methods that we can do to address both. So the first one is going to be stomach acid production. A really common problem at the moment for a lot of people is low stomach acid production. And if we have inadequate amount of stomach acid being produced, again, we're not going to have full absorption of and breakdown of the food. The second one is digestive enzyme production. So again, another common one that we're seeing is people not being able to produce sufficient amounts of the various digestive enzymes needed to break down their carbohydrates, proteins, fats. With both of these, and we're getting malabsorption, there's a couple of easy tests which I'll probably outline towards the end of this video, and most of it comes back to, again, we can use some supplementation to really help people in these situations. So for stomach acid, we can tend to use something called betaine hydrochloride, or betaine HCl. And again, there's a protocol that we might talk about later, that you can use with your clients to test if low stomach acid is in fact their issue, and again at what level they should be supplementing. And then for digestive enzymes, really fail-safe method is to use a good quality digestive enzyme supplement. I use Super Enzymes by Now Foods. Again, it's good quality, and again, you can see fairly quickly if this is having an impact on your clients. So what tends to happen in both of these cases is we find that there could be some sort of gut distress, and there's some sort of relief to their symptoms by taking each of those. We can outline these later. The second thing that we mentioned at the start of the video was leaky gut. So really what's going on is, here in this diagram you'll see we have the gut lining, so these various individual cells, and from one side, so the top of the diagram here indicates what we're going to have that we may be exposed to inside in the gut, and then those materials can get transported down into our bloodstream, which causes the problem. One thing that we will outline in the next video on food intolerances relates back to this idea of leaky gut as well, and it's probably really misunderstood even with people who are used to this terminology and who have came across this before, in that most will think we have an intolerance to a food, and then therefore when we eat this causes damage to the gut lining. Whereas in fact it's probably more that it's happened in reverse. So we have taken in something that's caused an increase in gut permeability, so an increase in those gaps between the cells of our gut lining, something has managed to slip through, so a larger particle of food. So if we take the example of, say, a protein that hasn't been broken down completely into its individual amino acids, a large molecule of this will slip through the gut lining, get into the bloodstream, and then our body has to kick off an immune response against it. So it starts creating antibodies against this. We get increased inflammation, and then we can get hormonal imbalances and so on. And we're going to talk about one of the main ones that causes this in our video, in tomorrow's video on intolerances. So again, just be aware that it could be something as simple as something causing leaky gut, and then we get these problems from that. One thing that's really important is this idea of gut dysbiosis, and that's what I'm going to spend most of this video talking about. And gut dysbiosis, as I mentioned at the start, is this imbalance between our good bacteria. So this is typically bifidobacteria, lactobacilli, Saccharomyces, the typical bacteria that you'll see in probiotic supplements, for example. So there's an imbalance between these good bacteria and then the bad or pathogenic bacteria that are populating our gut. So we can get like an overgrowth of Streptococcus bacteria. We can get viruses. We can get an overgrowth of Candida, which is a yeast. And when we have this imbalance between good and bad bacteria, then we have all sorts of problems. So, for example, how does that actually relate to weight loss, though? So if we have someone with some sort of gut dysbiosis, so they have an overgrowth of bad bacteria, what actually happens is, due to its effect on the liver, we get an increase in estrogen. And when estrogen is increased, we also get an increase in something called thyroid binding globulin. And as the name suggests, thyroid binding globulin actually will cause binding to active thyroid. So what we get is, we have our inactive form of thyroid hormone is T4, and our active form of thyroid hormone is T3. So the conversion of T4 to T3 actually decreases when our thyroid binding globulin goes up. So if we're getting less of this T4 being converted to T3, then obviously enough we're going to get less T3 circulating. So if we have lower amount of T3, i.e. a lower amount of our active thyroid hormone, as we looked at in one of the previous videos, thyroid hormone is a good regulator of metabolism. So we've decreased the amount of active thyroid. What happens? We have a decreased metabolism. So our metabolism is pulled right back down. And obviously if we have a slowed down metabolism, this is not good news for clients that are trying to lose fat. So their fat loss may be down to a lowered metabolism, which we can trace all the way back to something like gut dysbiosis. Similarly with gut dysbiosis, it's important to look at the detoxification that goes on in the liver. So most of those pathogenic bacteria that could be overgrowing are what we call gram-negative bacteria. And one of the main problems with gram-negative bacteria is that they contain something called lipopolysaccharides, or LPS. Now, lipopolysaccharides slow down detoxification in the liver. And when we slow down this detoxification process, obviously this impairs liver health. And why is this important? Going back to our conversion of inactive thyroid, T4, into active thyroid, T3, 60% of that conversion occurs in the liver. So if we're slowing this down, we're impairing liver health, we're then again going to affect the conversion of T4 to T3, we get a lowering in metabolism. Also on top of that, most of the other hormones that you can think about are going to be metabolized in the liver as well. So if we have this impaired liver health, we're going to have imbalances in various other hormones. And again, hormonal imbalances can affect fat loss. So where do we start? There is so much going on in the gut, and it's such an advanced area that there's no kind of one thing that we can start doing and say, okay, now someone's gut's impaired. And this is probably one of the biggest problems I see, is that most people think, okay, just to sort out the gut, we'll buy a probiotic supplement. If any of these things are going on and you just give someone a probiotic, it's really just a drop in the ocean and it's not going to do a whole lot. So what do we do? First, you have to ask, what are the symptoms? So is there a cause for you to believe that there is a digestive issue going on? So are they experiencing a lot of bloating? Are they having a lot of gastrointestinal distress after a meal? Are they getting pain? Are they getting a lot of gas production? What's their stool consistency like? All these various things that may tell us that there's a digestive issue going on. The first place that's kind of fail-safe method to start is digestive enzyme supplementation, just for the fact that it's not going to be causing any real problems and they may get relief from being able to digest those meals better. Especially if we find that they're not able to tolerate higher fat meals. Again, an enzyme supplement will work pretty well. There's also some other supplements that you may throw in the mix there as well. If we find it's a problem, especially say with fat, we could try something like an ox bile supplement. The next thing that I typically tend to do with clients is go through a betaine HCl protocol. And again, I won't outline the whole thing here, but again, you can probably find decent one online, or you can ask someone if you're not comfortable trying this with a client. But again, it generally goes around, you're getting a betaine HCl supplement, and we're using a progressively increased dosage to find at what level they need to supplement to increase their stomach acid if they do have low stomach acid. But again, it's something to bear in mind that it is a kind of a DIY thing that you can do without someone having advanced testing. The next thing is to actually test for gut dysbiosis, and this is in the form of a stool test where we'll test for levels of those pathogenic bacteria. So for example, we can test for H. pylori, and we can test for an overgrowth of those other pathogenic bacteria we mentioned earlier. And again, so a doctor will be able to do this, or a functional medicine practitioner you can get to carry out this stool test. One thing to keep in mind is that we can't just do one thing and expect that to cure everything if there is some sort of damage to the gut. So if there's some sort of leaky gut, and we'll talk about this more in the final video, but if there is reason to believe that there's leaky gut, we actually have to do something to actively heal the gut. So supplementation again can be a good place to start. Vitamin D and L-glutamine are great to go. And then once we have some sort of idea that there's damage there, before we even start those supplementation regimens, it's important to remove what is actually causing that. And again, this is what I'll spend a lot of time talking about in the next video. So for example, if it's gluten that's causing that problem, obviously we have to get that person gluten-free and then start supplementing with, say, vitamin D, glutamine, and healing the gut actively. Then the final part is going to be to actually support gut health from that point on. So we've got their gut slightly back healthy. We'll have to repopulate it with healthy gut bacteria. So this could be a probiotic supplement. It could be getting them to eat fermented foods or prebiotics, even supplementing with something like resistant starch. And there's all these various things we can do. Again, we don't have the time to go through all these. It's just such a big area. But these are things to keep in mind. And this is kind of a step-by-step how I would think about it. So that's a rundown of gut health, digestive health, and how, just kind of giving you the explanation behind how it can actually be causing a client not to be losing fat. And so it really just shows that they could be having nothing to do with their calorie intake, their food quality, their training. They could still be failing to lose fat just on something like gut dysbiosis.